Coming in at number 10, we have Quinn Skaggs. Right off the bat, with a name like Quinn Skaggs, you know this guy means business. This guy sounds like he's a character from a Guy Ritchie movie. If you're in the crime world and you're dealing with Quinn Skaggs, he's probably going to cut your pinky off when you don't pay him back in time. Now, Quinn had a long rap sheet when he was brought in. He was only 17 and he had already been arrested for a burglary spree where he was breaking into people's homes while armed with a handgun. Man, at his age, the most dangerous thing I was doing was trying to convince my older brother to buy me a Mickey of rum so I could feel cool at a party. Skaggs also got into a fight at school, and when a teacher tried to break it up, he beat the hell out of the teacher, who needed to have surgery on his face. This 17-year-old was being held in a detention center and then kicked out the window and used bed sheets to scale down the side of the building like he was in the show Prison Break. Coming in at number 9, we have a big breakout. If you're gonna break out, you might as well bring some of your friends with you, right? Well, some teens in Nashville thought that this was the best idea. They had a plan to break out, and I think it worked better than they ever would have expected. Here's an opening from the news story that was covering the incident.
Good evening. Take a look at these photos. Tonight, the hunt continues for 7 teens who escaped from the Woodland Hills Juvenile.
The news highlighted the 7 that were still on the loose, but 32 actually made a break at the same time. That's what you call teamwork. Basically what happened was all of these teens kicked out the windows to their rooms at the same time and then jumped out the windows and hightailed it into the woods. Now you might think it would have been confusion that caught all of these cops off guard, and that's why so many people were able to get away, but it was actually just incompetence on the side of the police. They didn't even notice that the teens had escaped until an hour after it had happened. Coming in at number 8, we have Miko West. If you break out of prison, the first thing you're going to want to do is lay low. Well, that's what they have you believe in the movies. That there's some secret hideout you can go to and there's a bunch of your friends there. Maybe there's an Xbox and there's always really good food. But in reality, when you get out of prison, you have nowhere to go. You don't even have clothes to change into, and you're obviously in an orange jumpsuit. So unless you have everything planned out, most criminals who escape will turn back to crime because it's the only way they can get money and something to eat. This is what happened to Miko West. He was able to break out by swiping a key card and then opening the front door and just walking right out. That sounds like something that was pulled right out of a video game, but it was true. Then he got busted when he tried to steal a candy bar. The dude was just trying to get something to eat. Coming at number 7, we have the Nashville teens. A juvenile detention center in Nashville was holding 4 possibly dangerous teens who managed to escape in December of 2019. How they escaped is still unknown, but it's thought that they snuck past the guards and then jumped a fence and then were on the run. Now, why were these teens being held? I mean, the 4 of them were between the ages of 15 and 17, so how deadly could they be? I keep thinking about what I was doing at that age, and I really was just trying to spend more time playing video games and less time doing homework. That's as crazy as I got. Well, it turns out that these 4 might have been up to something a little more intense. 2 of them were wanted for armed robbery, and the other 2 were wanted for murder. Well, I don't think there's any homework in jail, so I guess that's a little bit of a bonus. Coming in at number 6, we have Joyride. A Louisiana detention center had 3 teens break out with an escape vehicle that was drawing a lot of attention, because there's a lot of ways in which you could slip out of a detention center. You could do the whole walk through the woods thing for hours and people chase you down with lights and dogs. That's a classic. There's also the Shawshank crawl through a mile of poop and then you come out on the other side and then you move to Mexico. Or my favorite, which is sit on each other's shoulders and wear a massive trench coat and a fake mustache, but that's a very advanced technique. But these teens wanted to escape in something that was a lot less inconspicuous. The 3 of them decided that they would jump into a cop car and drive into the city. Well, it didn't take long for the cops to pull them over, and the 3 teens were thrown back in prison. It seems that these teens were going for the hiding in plain sight approach to sneaking away. Coming at number 5, we have It Worked in the Movies. Let's move back over to Nashville, where one teen wanted to try another escape tactic. This goes to show that you can't trust anything you see in the movies, because when you try it in real life, it doesn't work out at all. Like when this teen tried to escape from a juvenile prison by walking through the ceiling. When you see something like that happening in the movies, it always seems like the sneakiest move of all time. When someone slides through the vents and it's all perfectly clean, and then when in reality it would be packed with bugs and it would be one of the loudest things of all time. Well, look at what happens when people try to recreate the movies in real life. As you can see from the clip, they could hear him walking around in the ceiling, and eventually he came smashing through the drywall. You know what? I'm gonna give this guy an A+ for trying and even getting into the ceiling in the first place. Even though his plan didn't come together, it's still very bold. Coming in at number 4, we have Bretan McAuliffe. This one is actually terrifying. Bretan McAuliffe was arrested for attempted murder. He was only 16 years old, so they put him into a juvenile correctional facility. He was meant to serve all of his time there, but while staying at the facility, they thought it would be a good idea to include him in a program that would help troubled youth find work while they were serving time. So he was given a job as a construction worker, and it seemed like things were going well until one day he just vanished. He literally just walked off the job site. A very simple escape plan, but an effective one. This is where the story gets even crazier. Bretan was on the run for over a month, and in this time he stole a gun and shot a woman 4 times. Thankfully, the woman lived. Coming in at number 3, we have Ty Harris, the getaway master. It doesn't matter how hard the police try to catch this kid, it seems they can't keep him behind bars. Ty Harris was originally in a standoff with police where they were chasing him down for robbery. He had this standoff, but then he slipped away. The police eventually caught him, and then he was locked up in a Nashville juvenile detention prison. While staying there, he realized the best way to not be in prison is to break out through one of the windows and escape on foot. This is when his skills at evading the police came into play again. Ty made it to a strip mall, and when the police showed up, he hid behind a truck and the cops didn't see him, and then they drove off while he was right under their noses. Ty then stole a truck from this strip mall parking lot where the cops were just looking for him and slipped away and was nowhere to be found. Holy moly, this kid is good at not getting caught. Coming in at number 2, we have Party Time. Sometimes you break out of prison not because you wanted to get free and run away from your punishment. No, you just wanted a little bit of a breather. You want to stretch your legs a little bit, maybe catch up with your friends and feel good for a little while before you have to go back. Well, apparently this happens more often than you would think. Juvenile detention centers all over America have had teens who break out after prisons are finished doing their rounds. They will sneak out and go party with their friends for a little while, usually have their friends meet them outside with some sort of substances that make them feel really good. Then before it's time to wake up in the morning, they will be back in their beds like nothing happened. Maybe prisons should be a little more fun and people wouldn't be trying to break out all the time. God, I'm so smart. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have TJ Lane, one of the most terrifying teens to ever escape prison. TJ Lane was given a triple life sentence for coming to his high school with a handgun and killing 3 students in cold blood. He did this all while wearing a shirt which he wrote the word killer on the front. On top of this, in a way to mock his victims, he wore another shirt that said killer to his sentencing. While held in a state prison, he saw an open window and made a break for it. Thankfully, he wasn't on the loose for very long before he was captured. This could have turned out to be so much worse, but he was quickly taken back to prison, where he will most likely be for the rest of his life.
List in at number 10, we have Brian Lee Draper. Let me take you guys back to the night of September 22nd, 2006, where Brian Draper and his accomplice brutally murdered their classmate Cassie Stoddard for no apparent reason. They were hanging out with Cassie and her boyfriend on the night that Brian and his accomplice said that they were going to the theater to see a movie. As it turns out, they never went to the theater. They were hiding in the house waiting for Cassie's boyfriend to leave so that they can kill her. They turned the electricity off and stabbed the poor girl 30 times. During their trial, the 2 of them confessed to filming the entire plan. So here's a short clip of the 2 of them driving away from the scene of the crime.
I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a joke.
I'm shaking.
I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie.
How sick and morbid is this? It just seems like they're so proud of what they've just done. Well, they were quickly picked up and interrogated, and they were arrested because their fake alibi fell through, and they were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Keep in mind that they were only 16 when they decided to brutally murder their friend. John Silva stabs his way onto this list at number 9. He was only 15 years old when he was convicted of first-degree murder after he strangled a 12-year-old boy and dumped his body in a septic tank. He was convicted of first-degree murder, and when he was sentenced to life in prison without parole, he didn't show any emotions. If he was an adult, he could have faced the death penalty because he even admitted to kidnapping his friend, forcing him to go to the woods, and then suffocating him to death. What a brutal crime. Even though he admitted to doing all of that, he never explained why he did it. So yeah, this guy sounds like a serial killer in the making. The police even found a note at the scene of the crime, and on that note it said, list to prepare Jerry, and on the note it said, strip to underwear, tie hands, gag and cover eyes. And like I said, he's a serial killer in the making, so maybe it's a good thing that he's gonna be behind bars for the rest of his life, because the world's gonna be a much safer place. Number 8 takes us to Joshua Phillips. He was convicted of life in prison without parole back in July of 1999, and that's after he murdered his 8-year-old neighbor when he was just 14 years old. He strangled, bludgeoned, and stabbed Maddie Clifton to death. He stuffed her lifeless body underneath his waterbed, but she wouldn't stay hidden for long. Joshua's mother came into his room days after the murder and found the dead body, which led him to confess to this murder. He said that they were playing basketball outside and he accidentally hit her on the head with his bat. He said he panicked and then killed her because he was scared of what his father would think. And I don't know, it seems like you killed her because you are a psychopath. This was no accident. Here's a clip of Joshua that was filmed 1 decade after the murder.
I'm going like, alright, well, maybe I did deserve to be here. Maybe I deserve to do as much time. Maybe I deserve to die in prison. And but I always usually come back with the thought that I can't look at it like that, you know, and that doing that is just a cop-out and faking it, you know, just saying screw it, and why would I try to learn anything? Why would I try to improve myself? Why would I try to do anything to help anybody if I'm just gonna lay down and just die in here, you know?
Even though he might seem like he has changed, I feel like he is a textbook psychopath who knows the right things to say in order to look like a victim. The youngest American citizen to be sentenced to life in prison makes their way onto this list at number 7. I'm talking about the notorious Lionel Tate, who was just 13 years old when he was convicted of first-degree murder.
To be the case, incarceration for your natural life. The now 14-year-old Lionel Tate was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Back on July 28, 1999, Lionel was left alone with a 6-year-old friend in the basement. The two of them were downstairs playing when all of a sudden Lionel came upstairs 45 minutes later to tell his mother that the little girl wasn't breathing. He said that they were wrestling and he had her in a headlock and then smashed her against the table. An autopsy revealed that he had stomped on her so hard that he actually lacerated her liver, fractured her skull and ribs, and her brain was very swollen. During the trial, the prosecution said that these injuries can be compared to falling from a 3-story building. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and the judge said that the acts of Lionel Tate were not the playful acts of a child. The acts of Lionel Tate were cold, callous, and cruel. Moving on to number 6, let's talk about Corvassier Sims.
A judge sentenced 17-year-old Corvassier Sims to 70 to 120 years in prison after pleading guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and use of a weapon in their deaths.
Alright, I have to ask, is this real life right now? 70 to 120 years? I know that sounds insane, but I think the sentencing, it kind of fits this crime. He was only 15 years old when he shot 2 teenagers, ages 17 and 18 years old, while he was attempting to buy a gun off of them. It was decided that he'd be tried as an adult because he was involved in armed robberies and 2 homicides. Oh, and he was on probation during the murders for other crimes that he committed in the past. What? So yeah, I think it's safe to say that he is a repeat offender and he will most likely die behind bars because I don't think a parole board will ever grant him probation. At least I'm really hoping they don't. Rodrigo Caballero crawls onto this dark list at number 5. Rodrigo Caballero was sentenced to 110 years in prison when he was 16 years old, and he didn't even he didn't even kill anyone. So how is this possible? Well, the 16-year-old fired several gunshots at 3 other teenagers, where one of them suffered from a non-fatal but serious injury. He was convicted of 3 counts of attempted murder, and each of those charges, they come with a minimum 15-year to life. And the judge also handed him special enhancements onto his sentencing for firing a gun belonging to a gang and greatly injuring one of the victims. When you add up all of these charges, you get 110 years. So technically, he isn't sentenced to life to prison without parole. He will be eligible for parole when he's 126 years old, but most likely he is going to be dead before he makes it to his parole hearing. Up next, number 4, we have Gregory Brooks. He was 19 years old when he pleaded guilty to abducting and killing the parents of a former talk show host. Gregory Brooks and his accomplices beat them, stole $50, a rifle, jewelry, and other items, then they locked the couple in a closet. Later, one of the accomplices said he would return to the house to finish them off. The judge gave him 60 years for each of the 2 counts of murder and robbery charges, and just moments after he was sentenced to 120 years, his father told reporters that despite his son having a good, supportive upbringing, he was influenced by gang members with negative motives. Could you imagine being sentenced to 120 years in maximum prison at such a young age? Your whole life is just gone. He will literally die and rot behind bars for the rest of his life because of one stupid night. Moving up this list, at number 3, we're talking about Eddie Devine. This case is pretty intense, so prepare yourselves. He was only 13 years old at the time when him and his friend forced a woman into a car where they drove around for hours while they tortured and violated her with an ice pick. Thankfully, the woman was able to escape when the teenager stopped for gas, but she will be scarred for the rest of her life. Eddie Devine pleaded guilty to 2 counts of armed carjacking, 3 counts of armed robbery, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 2 counts of sexual battery. This kid isn't even old enough to go around the block by himself, and he's already committing all of these horrible crimes. To make things even worse, he told police that he was armed with a knife and he threatened to kill the woman before they stole her SUV. I'm pretty sure when I was 13, I was collecting Pokemon cards. I wasn't going around committing all these crimes. Eddie Devine did not get off lightly. He was sentenced to a total of 130 years in prison. Kenneth Young sneaks onto this list at number 2. He was only 14 years old when his mother's drug dealer forced him to get involved in a series of armed robberies. During one heist, Kenneth was caught, convicted, and sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences. So basically, he was sentenced to be thrown behind bars without ever having a chance of being released, and he didn't even injure or kill anyone. Let's hear from Kenneth Young.
Kenneth Young. First and foremost, Your Honor, I want to take the time out and say I take full responsibility for my actions and my role in these crimes. I have lived with regret every day as a civilized human being for these crimes. I have been incarcerated for 11 years, and I have taken advantage of every opportunity available for me in prison to better myself.
He was coerced into committing these crimes, and he was at such a young and impressionable age. I don't think he should have gotten this harsh sentence. Because of this young age and the severity of the sentence, he spent most of his time in solitary confinement until he reached 18 years old, where he was then transferred to an adult prison where he will grow old and die. And now at the top of our list, we've talked about him before. We actually did a whole docu-series of him. If you guys want to check that out, you guys can click right over here. It's called The Prison Life of Travion Blount. Well, Travion Blount makes it onto our list at number 1 for this video. Travion Blount was 15 years old when he robbed a party with 2 older gang members. Travion didn't hurt anyone, but he was found guilty of 49 counts, and eventually he was sentenced to 6 life sentences and an additional 118 years in prison. He knew he would be spending a few years in prison. He didn't expect to die in there. This has to be one of the harshest punishments in America for a teenager who didn't even commit homicide. Oh, and his accomplice, well, they only served 10 to 13 years in prison. I don't understand how this was even possible. Out of the 3 of them, Travion was the least involved, but he got the most time. After spending some time in prison, Travion finally got a glimpse of hope.
Received much lighter sentences.
Governor Bob McDonnell reduced Blount's sentence to 40 years
and today, Governor Terry McAuliffe cut it down to 14.
I mean, what the heck? His sentence was reduced from 6 life sentences plus 118 years to just 14 years. This makes me wonder what the heck was wrong with the original judge. I think his license should be put into question because I have no idea what was going through his mind. Maybe he was severely power tripping that day. He was just so pissed off, he's like, I'm giving you life, plus life, plus life, plus life, plus life, and plus life, and if that's not enough, plus 118 years, just in case. At number 10, we actually have a teenager who started to freak out after she was denied any possibility of parole. She was really hoping for it. When she was denied, she started to freak out. So what you're about to see is a 19-year-old killer who killed 21-year-old Nathan Potter. The victim's family was very afraid, but they are glad that they're being locked away for life. At least they can sleep at night knowing that a killer won't be out there. Next up, we have a teenager who admitted to murder while he throws up in a courtroom in at number 9.
Mosley became ill in court today after he pled guilty to aggravated murder and other charges. Prosecutors believe the reaction was a genuine sign of remorse.
So that was remorseful Timothy Mosley. Remorseful or not, he murdered 18-year-old Justin Michael Back in Waynesville, Warren County, Ohio. Justin Back was murdered at his family's home. Mosley took a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty. So all Mosley had to do was give the court all the information they want of exactly what happened and what was his involvement in this murder. There was another teenager involved as well. He was identified as Austin Meyer. Austin was given the death sentence and he became the youngest inmate on death row in Ohio at the time. Meyer was sentenced to death at the age of 19 years old back in 2014. He is still currently on death row and his new execution date is in 2022. That is just absolutely insane. Do you guys think that teenagers should be allowed to be given the death penalty? Let me know in the comment section below. Alright, number 8.
In the direction of the deceased torso and lower extremities with that 2 times.
So that was a gangman who murdered 15-year-old Alessandro Guzman Feliz. The gunman was a part of the Dominican gang in the Bronx. So this death occurred in a mistaken identity, so the wrong person was killed according to all the testimonies. There was 12 suspects in this case. Right now there are 4 suspects in this case, including the guy who we just saw incarcerated at Rikers Island. They are segregated from other prisoners and they've been receiving heightened security protection at the prison due to receiving death threats from within the prison and even from their own gang members for killing an innocent teenager. So let's just say that being locked up right now might be the safest thing for these teenagers. Next up, number 7, we have a bunch of teenagers freaking out in court.
The end result, more individuals being taken into custody.
There was a group of teenagers who led police in a car chase after stealing a vehicle. These are some pretty serious crimes, but yet in the courtroom these teenagers were not taking the situation seriously. It just looks like they're all trying to impress each other.
At the hearing for 15-year-old Maurice Thomas, the suspected driver, and 15-year-old Thomas Butler, seen here smiling for our cameras, the pair seemed to show up to show out in front of a judge.
I think these kids have to be on drugs or something. And why are they giving gang signs in the courtroom? Next up, number 6, we have another teenager who might have taken a lot of drugs. It looks like this kid is going through withdrawal because he appeared in court shaking like crazy and it looks like he just can't control himself. So this right here is 17-year-old Jeffrey Hazelwood from Georgia, and you can see how much this kid is shaking in court. It looks like he can't control it. Hazelwood is accused of killing 2 teenagers behind a grocery store. He is facing a ton of serious criminal offenses. On top of the murder cases, Hazelwood will be facing aggravated assault, theft, and financial fraud charges as well. Hazelwood does not look mentally fit during the investigation and his hearing. There was actually a video of Jeffrey Hazelwood freaking out during an intense investigation where he said, "I didn't shoot them," but then as the video goes on, he says, "A voice in my head said to do it."
Running away the first time, after you shot them, running away.
Didn't shoot them.
Because the bad guy would have gotten you. That's the story that we're going with. The invisible bad guy that looks just like you.
So, contradicting himself a little bit, and he's admitting that he actually did it. I do hope this kid can get some serious help. Moving into number 5.
Court? Come back again.
That was 18-year-old Penelope Soto, who appeared in court after she was arrested for possession of a prescription drug as Xanax. While in court, she decided to just laugh at the whole thing and cuss at the judge. Well, this turns out to be the wrong move.
Well, it's not a joke, you know. We have not had any kind of drugs in the last 24 hours.
Actually.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
Come back, ma'am. Come back.
The judge upped the bail.
Count one would be 10,000.
Are you serious?
I am serious. Adios.
So after all of that happened, the teenager still didn't learn from that. The judge raised her bail to $10,000. He dismissed the teenager, but on her way out, this happens.
Come back again.
And the judge flipped.
What's up?
I believe I heard you saying to...
Yes, I did. I'm not going to the...
I believe you... Did you say me?
Actually, I
Did you say that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Oh, you did say that?
I'm not
I find you in direct criminal contempt. 30 days in the county jail.
I can't help but to laugh at this. This is just stupidity, and hopefully this is a lesson learned. Alright, number 4.
Indicate that Miss Me presents a flight risk, or that she would, with the conditions that we proposed and any others that the court would add.
This video actually went viral because 15-year-old Jennifer Me was crying hysterically, and she was hiccuping as well. And now she is dubbed the Hiccup Girl. Piers Morgan actually interviewed the Hiccup Girl, talking about the crimes that she committed. She was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and this is for a gunshot murder despite not actually pulling the trigger herself. Jennifer Me was just with the wrong crowd of people. Moving into number 3.
When Luis Reyes learned that he'd be in jail for the next 30 years, you knew just by his body language the bailiffs would have to hold him.
That was Luis Reyes Jr., who was just sentenced to 30 years in prison after his very sinful act of sexually assaulting an 89-year-old woman. Is this real life right now? That is just sickening. Well, in court when he found out his sentencing, he started to freak out and he had to be taken out of the court and restrained. The 89-year-old woman was actually there in the courtroom listening to the sentencing. The teen did apologize for what he has done, but the court didn't think Reyes had remorse, hence his sentencing. Number 2.
Brings 17-year-old Jacob Muzon and 18-year-old Drake Campbell to tears.
That was 17-year-old Jacob Muzon and 18-year-old Drake Campbell, who broke into tears in court. They were both being charged for murder, attempted murder, burglary, and 2 counts of armed robbery. Both of the teenagers only started crying when the judge denied their bonds due to a lack of emotion they gave during the trial. Both teens showed no remorse. One of the sisters spoke in court, and she apologized for him, and she knows that in their hearts they are breaking. So they're not showing any physical remorse, it's just all the remorse inside. I don't buy it. And finally, number 1, we have this. That actually sounded like a gunshot went off. I was actually really afraid when I watched this video. I was like, what the heck just happened? Well, that was 19-year-old Dexter Johnson from Texas, who had to be restrained from police officers after he decided to lunge towards the victim's family. I mean, haven't you done enough? This came just after he was sentenced to death, so he thought, you know what, there's nothing else to lose, let's just go hurt some more people. Luckily, there was like 30 officers in that room. One of the county court deputies actually tackled, like he lunged and tackled Johnson to the ground. And that happened just before he was able to attack the family members.